The feather mattress and the first throb. The fire in the hearth has long since faded to embers, glowing dimly beneath the iron grate. The stone walls of the chamber breathe coolness into the space, though thick tapestries hang over the cold surfaces, muting sound and slowing the night's chill. Outside, the manor lies in a hush, the kind of quiet that settles only in the deep hours after midnight. Somewhere far below, the final murmurs of the kitchen staff have died away. A dog barks once, distantly, and then the silence returns, as complete and still as the stone it rests upon. You lie awake in your great bed, its frame carved of oak, heavy and eternal. Beneath your linen sheets, your legs shift carefully across the feather-stuffed mattress, a luxury far beyond the reach of the villagers who live beyond your gates. The fabric smells faintly of lavender and beeswax, washed in the same tubs the servants use for the linens of the chapel. You should be asleep. You wish to be asleep, but you are not. Because there, in your foot, just at the base of the big toe, something stirs. It begins as a tightness, barely noticeable, like a ribbon wound too snugly. And then, with the slow cruelty of creeping fog, it sharpens. Deepens. As if a coal, still smoldering, had been pressed beneath the skin. You inhale. Quietly. The pain is familiar. Too familiar. You shift slightly, careful not to brush the linen too harshly against your toe. Even the weight of the sheet can be enough to set the pain ablaze. The mattress creaks beneath your movement, though softly. Your wife, Lady Elenina, has long since retired to her own chambers, a custom the two of you adopted after your second child. There is no one here to witness your discomfort, no one to whom you must explain the faint wince in your eyes or the stiffness in your voice. At least not yet. Outside your leaded glass windows, the stars are bright and cold. The sky has that crisp clearness that only winter grants, a black vastness dotted with firelight. Beneath it, peasants curl into straw pallets, exhausted from the day's labor. Their hands blistered from hoe and plow, their bellies filled with bread and root vegetables, perhaps a slice of salted pork if fortune smiled. Their lives are hard, dirty, and yet, sometimes, in moments like this, you wonder if they are not, in some way, freer than you. The pain pulses again, sharper this time. You clench your jaw. In the corner, the coals hiss softly, dim and red. There is a bell at your bedside, small and iron. You reach for it without urgency and give it a single tap. A dull chime, quickly swallowed by the chamber's thick curtains and tapestries. A few moments pass. Then the door creaks open, just enough for a candle's glow to spill inward. A silhouette enters. Thomas, your manservant. He closes the door softly behind him and bows. "My lord," he whispers. You speak low, measured. "Fetch Master Gilbert. The pain has returned." Thomas nods, concern flickering across his otherwise stoic face. He bows once more and disappears, his footsteps fading through the corridor like whispers down a stone throat. You lie back, exhaling through your nose. You know what will follow. The tinctures, the compresses, the hushed instructions. And then the waiting, for the pain to dull, for the night to pass, for the routines of lordship to resume. Because no matter how wealthy you are, how grand your manner or fine your garments, pain is a visitor that answers to no titles. It comes when it pleases, and it stays as long as it wishes. Tonight, you are not a lord, not a landowner, not a pillar of regional nobility. You are merely a man, alone in the dark, waiting for relief. And the pain pulses on. Master Gilbert and the bitter wine. The manor is still quiet when the door opens once again. The candle returns first, its flickering light dancing across the walls, drawing long shadows on the carved beams overhead. Then, behind Thomas, comes Master Gilbert, your physician. He walks with the measured pace of a man both respected and accustomed to long hours. His robes are woolen and well-kept, dyed a faded blue that once might have signaled affluence. In his hands he carries a satchel made of tooled leather, worn at the corners and smooth from use. "My lord," he murmurs with a low bow. Thomas said it is the foot again. You nod. The same toe. As before. I feared as much. The weather has turned. Dampness in the joints. It stirs things from within. He kneels beside your bed, setting his satchel on a padded stool. The latches click open, and he draws out a small flask of dark glass, a roll of soft linen, and a mortar and pestle made from rough gray stone. I will need a moment to prepare the paste. The same mixture as last time, willow bark, sage, wine vinegar. You offer no reply. Gilbert has served your house for nearly a decade. Before that, he studied in Melier, in the south of France, at one of the few true schools of medicine left in Christendom. He is one of the rare men permitted to cut into flesh when necessary, to read ancient texts that speak of humors and balances, to treat the wealthy with more than just prayer and superstition. He begins grinding the bark with practiced movements, adding a splash of the sharp-smelling vinegar. The sound of the pestle is rhythmic and oddly soothing, a soft crackle that fills the room like distant rain on slate. As he works, he speaks, his voice soft. Too much meat again, I suspect? You hesitate. There was a feast. Game bird. Some sweet wine. Ah. He doesn't judge. He rarely does. The wine was likely the worst of it. Sugar and spirits, a cruel invitation to the king's disease. He opens a separate vial, drawing a few drops of amber liquid into a small wooden spoon. This, he says gently, is the tincture of poppy. You may remember the taste. You nod grimly. It will dull the pain, perhaps even let you sleep. But only a single dose tonight, my lord. No more. You open your mouth and he tips it in. The liquid is bitter, strangely warm, with a resinous aftertaste that clings to the back of your throat. You grimace. He follows it with a draught of watered wine. You may feel light in the head. That is expected. He dabs the poultice gently onto your foot, wrapping it in the linen with the care of a craftsman. The warmth seeps through the skin almost at once, a slow bloom that pushes back against the ache. When the wrapping is secured, he rests back on his heels and studies your face. You are not sleeping enough, he says, not as an accusation but as a statement of fact. There is always something, you reply, a petition, a dispute, a letter from the crown. Gilbert nods. But the body remembers. Every indulgence, every lost hour of sleep, it stores them away like coins in a chest. And one day the chest bursts. You close your eyes, the poppy already working. The room sways gently, like a boat drifting from shore. No rich food tomorrow, he says, already rising. Barley water, plain bread, boiled chicken, perhaps. And no wine. You grunt in acknowledgement. I'll return at dusk, he adds. To check the swelling. For now rest. Thomas helps him gather his tools. The physician leaves as silently as he came, and soon the room is yours again. You lie still, feeling the tingling numbness spread through your limbs. The pain has dulled to something distant, muffled by the poppy's veil. Through half-lidded eyes, you watch the candlelight flicker on the beams above. And for the first time that night, your breath comes easy. But even as sleep begins to claim you, a single thought rises in your mind, uninvited, but persistent. What use is wealth, if even it cannot buy freedom from your own body? A meal of barley water and silence. The morning arrives slowly, dragging pale light through the eastern windows like soft cloth pulled across cold stone. The room is still hushed, as though the very walls themselves wish not to disturb you. Only the faint crackle of new logs in the hearth and the rustle of Thomas arranging your clothing by the foot of the bed mark the beginning of another day. You stir cautiously at first. The pain has not vanished, but it has faded from a burning, insistent cry to something more tolerable. A dull ache, pulsing gently. A reminder. Thomas assists you with practiced ease, helping you sit upright against a nest of pillows. He lifts your leg and places it upon a small padded stool, adjusting the linens to shield your foot without pressing against it. The poultice remains in place, faintly damp, faintly warm. A subtle comfort. On the table nearby, a modest tray awaits. A pewter bowl of barley water, thin and cloudy, a hunk of coarse bread, a few shavings of hard cheese, and a single boiled egg, still warm to the touch. The food is plain, colorless, quiet. You gaze at it, your appetite dulled, not by illness, but by memory. Just 2 nights past, this very chamber held platters of roasted fowl, gilded with spices from the Levant. The scent of cloves and nutmeg still lingers faintly in the draperies, like the echo of a melody now out of tune with your body. You lift the bowl of barley water and take a slow sip. It is bland, almost sour, but soothing. There is no excitement in it, no indulgence, only sustenance. The same kind of nourishment a monk might take in the stone-walled refectories of some far-off monastery. And yet, as the warm liquid passes your lips, it offers something your feasts never could. Relief. You chew the bread slowly. It is coarse, filled with bran, and hard at the edges. Not unpleasant, but humble. It bears the taste of earth and labor, of harvest dried and ground and baked into sustenance for the body, not celebration. There is no ceremony in this breakfast, only necessity. Thomas stands nearby, hands folded. He has learned to speak only when spoken to. And so, the chamber remains quiet, save for the muted sound of your own chewing and the crackle of flame. You find it oddly peaceful. The absence of clinking silverware, of servants darting between dishes, of stewards murmuring plans for the day's guests. It is like breathing clear mountain air after days inside a smoke-filled hall. When at last you finish, you set the tray aside. You may tell the steward, you say quietly, that today's meal will be served alone. Here. Thomas nods. No audience? None. There is a pause, as though the statement itself takes a moment to settle into the fabric of your routine. Very good, my lord, he says. You lean back against the pillows and exhale slowly. You remember, vaguely, the last time you ate so simply, years ago, perhaps, when your lands were threatened by poor harvests and you, as a gesture of solidarity, joined the peasants in a day of fasting. It had been symbolic, brief, a noble performance of humility. But this morning, there is no audience, no performance, only quiet. And in that quiet, a small revelation begins to bloom, faint and unformed, but present nonetheless. Perhaps your body was never meant for banquet halls. Not every frame is built for velvet and excess. Some require simplicity, not as punishment, but as preservation. The morning stretches on. Outside, the frost begins to melt upon the stone path leading to the orchard. You watch through the window as a pair of groundskeepers move slowly beneath the bare apple trees, clearing wind-blown branches into woven baskets. They do not know of your pain. They do not care. Their concern is with roots, with rot, with the coming of spring. You envy them, slightly. Not their labor, but their clarity, their lack of pretense. As the warmth of the fire seeps deeper into the chamber and the barley water settles in your belly, you rest your head back and close your eyes once more. Not to sleep, but to simply be still. To be quiet in a world that demands you speak, move, command, host, feast, perform. And perhaps, just for this one morning, you do not. Gout, the price of velvet robes. The midday light filters through the chamber's tall windows in shafts of pale gold, illuminating motes of dust that drift like ash through the air. You sit quietly now, your foot still propped upon its cushioned stool, the pain lessened but not forgotten. You feel it in the background, like a whisper in a crowded hall, subtle but insistent. The physician's words return to you, soft and measured. The wine was likely the worst of it. Sugar and spirits, a cruel invitation to the king's disease. That phrase lingers in your mind. The king's disease. It has other names, of course. The physicians call it arthritis rheumatica. The monks who copy ancient texts speak of morbus dominorum, the illness of lords. The common folk, when they whisper about their betters, call it simply gout. It is a mark of status, in a way, a quiet badge of wealth and indulgence. No peasant suffers from gout. Their bodies, lean from labor and fed by grains and pulses, do not know the torments of crystallized excess. But you do. You wear fine robes, lined with velvet and trimmed with sable, tailored to fit not just your body, but your role. You dine upon game birds and cream-filled pastries. You drink wine perfumed with cloves and cinnamon, imported at great cost from foreign lands. And in return, your joints swell. Your limbs stiffen. Your toes burn with invisible fire. This is the cost of your station. Your physician once remarked that a man's diet writes its memory upon his bones. You did not understand what he meant at the time, but you do now. There is irony in it, cruel but undeniable. The very symbols of your success, your refinement, your civility are the cause of your suffering. Velvet robes conceal throbbing joints. Ornate slippers hide the reddened, inflamed skin. And the grand feast table, groaning under the weight of luxury, is also an altar upon which your comfort is sacrificed. You shift slightly, adjusting the angle of your foot, and wince. Once, you believed that suffering belonged only to the poor. You thought pain was the companion of poverty, of hunger and cold, of calloused hands and straw-filled beds. And while that may still be true, you now understand something else. Wealth brings its own form of suffering, different in texture, but no less real. It is not the pain of absence, but the pain of too much. Too much food, too much stillness, too much expectation. The rituals of noble life, feasting, drinking, sitting long hours in council, none of these are kind to the body. They are kind to reputation, to image, but not to flesh. And now your body speaks. It whispers and aches. It grumbles in the joints. It punishes each indulgence with another stiff morning, another day on the stool, another visit from Master Gilbert. You run a hand down your thigh, feeling the layers beneath, the softness that was once muscle, the thickness that once meant strength, now simply excess. Your sword, once worn proudly, hangs in its scabbard by the far wall. You cannot remember the last time you buckled it on. You are not old. Not yet. But you are beginning to feel something approaching it. Not the decay of age, perhaps, but the heavy slowness of a life lived without motion. You recall, dimly, your childhood, running the orchard paths with your brothers, climbing over stone fences, leaping into cold streams. And now you measure your steps. Now you count your stairs. Now you dread the weight of your own body upon a foot too swollen to bear it. This, too, is part of nobility. The quiet truth that your own refinement might one day undo you. You reach for a nearby ledger, a small one, bound in calfskin. Not the steward's account book, not the king's correspondence. Just a personal volume, blank, save for your entries. Thoughts mostly. Records of weather. Scribbled memories. Sometimes questions unanswered. You dip the quill in ink and, with slow, deliberate hand, write, I wonder whether velvet and pain are not brothers. That the closer one draws to comfort, the more one invites discomfort. That the robes I wear are not armor, but chains. You pause. Then it gout has become a tutor, a cruel one, but patient. The words sit on the page like small weights. You close the book and set it aside. Outside the window, a group of stable boys are tending to the horses. You hear the distant whinny of a mare and the sharp ring of a horseshoe on cobblestone. You used to ride every week. You make a quiet vow to ride again. Perhaps not today. Perhaps not even this week. But soon. Even if only to prove to yourself that the robes, and all they represent, have not yet taken everything from you. Even if the pain follows close behind. Whispers among nobles. The great hall is warm with candlelight, each flame dancing in rhythm to the low hum of conversation. Wax drips lazily onto polished brass holders. Long tables stretch across the stone floor, their surfaces crowded with pewter dishes, carved trenchers, and goblets of dark wine. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meats, spiced sauces, and warm bread, aromas that once stirred appetite, now stirring only memory and caution. You sit at the high table, elevated slightly on the dais, beside your most honored guest, Baron Radcliffe, a neighbor of considerable influence whose support is essential to your standing in the county. To your other side sits Lady Ellalinina, regal in her calm poise, dressed in burgundy velvet, her eyes alert beneath her golden veil. You are dressed for the occasion, your finest doublet, embroidered with your house's crest, and hose thick enough to hide the padded slipper that cushions your aching foot. Beneath the table, your leg rests on a small stool hidden by linen folds. From the hall's perspective, you appear every inch the capable lord, seated with perfect composure at the head of his domain. But the pain simmers still, not as fire, but as a low pulse. A warning, a reminder. You sip your wine, a measured taste, not indulgent, and allow the conversation around you to continue its natural course. The Baron is speaking of trade tariffs, of the road to Dunwich, of a merchant ship lost in a winter storm near the southern coast. You nod, contribute where needed, but your mind drifts. All around the hall, nobles and courtiers are gathered. They laugh, gesture, lean in to share whispered stories. And as you watch them, a thought comes quietly, unbidden. How many of them are hurting too? How many of these dignified men and women, adorned in silks and silver, harbor the same aches in their joints, the same sharp stiffness when rising from sleep? How many carry vials of poppy tincture in the folds of their robes? How many, like you, smile through pain because anything less would be seen as weakness? You glance toward Baron Radcliffe. His laughter is full-bodied, his cheeks flushed from wine, but you notice the way he adjusts in his seat, subtly shifting weight off one foot. When the server lays a platter of rich duck glazed with figs before him, he hesitates, just briefly, before choosing a slice of boiled parsnip instead. He catches your eye and raises his goblet. "To your health, my lord," he says with a knowing smile. "And to the mercy of moderate appetites." You raise your cup in return. "Well said, Baron. The older we become, the wiser our stomachs grow." He chuckles. "Or perhaps our physicians grow more convincing." There is a shared understanding in that moment. No longer just two lords, but two aging men, acutely aware of their limits. He leans in slightly. "I've had a touch of it myself," he murmurs. "In the knee. Bloody awful. Couldn't walk for 3 days last harvest." "I've not ridden in 2 weeks," you admit quietly. "Even the thought of the stirrup makes my foot twitch." "Ah," he says with mock solemnity, "the disease of kings. And yet peasants think they want our lives." "They see the robes," you reply, "not the cost." He nods, looking down into his wine. For a moment, the candlelight reflects in his eyes, and there is a quiet, tired recognition between the two of you, a shared truth kept hidden behind velvet and silver. Across the hall, music begins, A slow tune played on lute and flute, something pastoral and nostalgic. Servants move through the aisles with the next course, a tart of soft cheese and herbs, followed by glazed apples soaked in cinnamon. You decline both with a polite wave. The Baron does the same. You glance around again, this time with new eyes. You notice the small signs, a man rubbing his knuckles absently, a lady rising from her seat more slowly than needed, a lord pressing fingers against his temple while feigning interest in conversation. They too are paying the price. Not all riches are visible. The hall may be filled with jewels and laughter, but beneath the surface runs a shared current of overindulgence, aging, and quiet endurance. Whispers of pain, softened by poppy, hidden by pride. As the music swells and the hall fills with light and movement, you take a breath and settle deeper into your seat. You raise your cup once more and sip, only lightly. The feast continues. But you have begun to understand its true nature. It is not a celebration. It is a performance. One that everyone here must play, no matter how much their bodies wish to rest. The burden of hosting. The feast presses onward, its rhythms as rehearsed as the ringing of the chapel bell. Dishes are cleared and replaced. Songs rise and fall like the tides. Servants glide across the flagstones, their footsteps hushed, their hands steady with trays that shimmer with pewter and silver. And you remain at the center of it all. The high table is a stage. Its occupants, actors in a silent play of status and performance. You smile at appropriate moments, tilt your head when the Baron speaks, nod to the steward who hovers just behind the curtain of servants. Your foot, still tucked beneath the table on its cushioned stool, throbs dully. No one can see it, of course. And that is the point. A good host, in medieval society, does not flinch. He does not wince, or falter, or excuse himself early. He is ever present, ever gracious. His duty is not simply to provide food or shelter, but to embody the reputation of his house, to reassure allies, to impress rivals, to show that his lands are well managed and his mind untroubled. This is the burden you carry tonight. Not your name or your crest, but the appearance of ease. You glance around the hall again. The music is livelier now, a reel plucked from the southern coast, full of rising notes and laughter. Somewhere near the center table, a young lordling begins to dance with a lady in a sapphire gown. Their movements are light, full of youth and wine. The room claps politely, and the musicians shift their tempo to match. Your own days of dancing feel distant. You remember them vaguely, the weight of ceremonial boots, the warmth of a hand on your sleeve, the hum of music beneath your feet. But now, the thought of even rising from your chair feels ambitious. Lady Ellalinina leans slightly toward you, her voice barely above the music. You hide it well, she says softly. You offer her a small smile. Only because I must. She nods once, not in approval, but in recognition. Shall I make an excuse for you? You shake your head. Not yet. The Baron watches. So do the others. Your eyes sweep the room again. At the far end of the hall, a young scribe takes notes in a ledger, capturing the names of noble guests and the order of courses. This record, will be copied and shared with other houses, a public account of your hospitality. Every name listed, every dish described, every goblet poured, all of it, a testament to your wealth and competence. And none of it includes the ache in your foot or the way your leg trembles slightly when you shift your weight. A servant approaches quietly, whispering something to Thomas behind you. Thomas leans close to your ear. My lord, the kitchens ask if the spiced custards should be served now or delayed. You hesitate. The custards are rich, symbolic, a final flourish of luxury. But they're also heavy, both in preparation and in digestion. You consider for a moment, then speak low. Serve them. Let the feast end strong. Thomas bows and disappears. There is a kind of tyranny in such decisions. You are not hungry. You will not eat the custards. And yet their presence matters. A performance for the senses, proof that your household can still afford saffron and sugar, can still impress the Baron and his entourage. You watch as the golden custards are carried into the room on wide platters. The guests applaud lightly. The Baron claps once with enthusiasm. The feast begins its final arc. And you remain still, your hands folded, your face calm. But inside, the truth stirs like a restless guest. You are tired, not only from pain or noise or wine, but from the constant balancing act, the need to be more than yourself, always. To be a symbol, to hold up a standard, to suppress discomfort and present strength, even when your body rebels. This is the cost of nobility, no less real than the taxes your peasants pay. Lady Elenina watches you quietly, her hand resting gently on your sleeve. No words pass between you. None are needed. As the music begins its final verse and the guests lift their spoons with smiles, you sit straighter in your chair, shoulders squared. You will see it through. You always do. But as the candles burn lower and the hall begins to empty, you cannot help but wonder, when, exactly, did hosting become a performance you no longer enjoyed? Candles, spices, and reputation. The feast is nearly over. The hall glows with the soft orange warmth of beeswax candles, hundreds of them set in wall sconces and clustered in polished candelabras. Their flames sway slightly with each breeze that sneaks in through cracks in the old stonework. The scent is thick, not unpleasant, but layered, roasted meat lingering in the rafters, wine soaked into the linen, a touch of smoke, and beneath it all, the unmistakable perfume of spice. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, a luxury known only to nobles, bought at great price from caravans that traveled oceans and deserts to reach your shores. A spoonful of cinnamon costs a farmhand's yearly wage. A pouch of saffron weighs less than a feather and more than a knight's ransom. And tonight, these treasures have been folded into pastries and custards, perfumes for the palate, symbols of refinement. They serve a purpose beyond taste. They speak, not in words, but in what they suggest, that your house is prosperous, that your trade routes are secure, that you are powerful enough to consume the exotic, the rare, the unreachable. But as you watch your guests raise spoons to their mouths, laugh, comment on the delicacy of the desserts, you feel the quiet weight of it all. Not just in your stomach, which you have declined to fill, but deeper in your understanding of what this ritual really is. The feast is not for nourishment. It is not even for pleasure. It is for reputation. In the world you inhabit, reputation is currency. More durable than gold. More delicate than glass. It can be broken by a single misstep, a failed dish, a limp handshake, a public show of weakness. You have built yours carefully. Years of alliances, marriages, well-kept lands, military levies paid on time, winter stores full before the frost. A misjudged banquet, a guest who leaves offended, a whispered rumor that the Lord can no longer afford saffron. These things can erode what sword and seal cannot protect. Your guests do not taste the spices because they crave flavor. They taste them to remember their place. And yours. As the candles burn lower and the servants begin clearing empty plates, your steward approaches. The musicians ask if they should play a final song, my lord. You glance at the hall. The Baron has leaned back, full and content. Lady Alizande fans herself slowly beside her aging husband, her smile fixed and pleasant. The mood is soft, dulled by wine and warmth. You nod. Let them play something gentle. Then we'll close the night. The steward bows. A moment later, a hush falls as the musicians begin a slow melody. A lullaby in form, though meant not for sleep but for transition. A signal that the feast is ending, the rolls of performance winding down. You take the opportunity to ease yourself backward in your chair. Your foot protests, but less now, a dull memory rather than a live wound. Lady Elalinina, ever observant, leans in. You've managed it well. Barely, you say, but convincingly. You glance again around the hall. Guess who 3 hours ago were strangers now speak in low, familiar tones. Deals are being struck in the margins of conversations. One knight will lend 3 horses to another's spring campaign. A baroness agrees to foster the daughter of a lesser noble for 2 winters. Each exchange, a thread in the tapestry of noble society. And your table, your food, your candles, your silence, made it all possible. But you know what they do not. Your leg is numb. You have not eaten since dawn. Your breath is slow because each pulse of blood through your foot awakens the pain anew. This, too, is what it means to be noble. Not just to host, but to hide. To mask discomfort in ceremony. To meet expectations with the illusion of ease. The music ends. The room holds a pause, like breath drawn but not released. Then the guests rise, thank their hosts, and begin to drift away. You remain seated, offering nods and brief words. You shake hands, smile when spoken to, and keep your weight off the foot. It is all rehearsed by now. The performance never truly ends. When at last the final guest departs and the great oak doors are shut, you let your back sink against the chair. The candles sputter. One by one, servants begin to extinguish them. The room darkens. And in that darkness, you feel it again. The cost of spices. The cost of light. The cost of maintaining a name carved in stone but lived in flesh. You whisper, almost to yourself, "Let the fire die down. I'll walk no further tonight." And in that small surrender, there is peace. Even if only for an hour. Pains shared in silence. The hall has emptied. Only a few servants remain, moving like ghosts in the half-light, clearing dishes with the quiet efficiency born of long practice. Candles sputter in their sconces, some reduced to pools of wax. A few flicker bravely still, casting uneven light across the stone columns and dark oak rafters. You have not yet moved. Your chair remains firm beneath you, your foot still resting on its hidden stool. Though the pain has receded into dullness, you know the cost of standing now would be steep. Not unbearable, but unnecessary. So you wait. Let the embers in the hearth fade. Let the silence stretch. Thomas returns, kneeling beside you with the ease of a man who knows what is needed before it is asked. "Shall I help you rise, my lord?" You shake your head gently. "Not yet. Give me a moment longer." He nods and remains there, silent. There is comfort in his presence. No expectation. No pity. Just quiet companionship, a quality you have come to value far more than all the eloquence of court poets and noble flatterers. From your position at the high table, your eyes wander across the now quiet hall. The very space that hosted laughter and music not an hour ago now feels vast, hollow. The echoes of clinking goblets and diplomatic whispers have faded into the stone, like wine stains into old linen. You notice, for the first time tonight, something subtle, a pattern. It is not just you who conceals discomfort behind decorum. Earlier in the evening, you saw Baron Radcliffe's fingers tremble slightly as he reached for his goblet. You saw Lady Alizanne wince as she rose from her seat, her smile fixed to conceal it. You saw the young lord, the one so eager to dance, excuse himself early, his cheeks flushed not from wine, but from pain. They are like you, all of them, bound not just by title or bloodline, but by the quiet erosion of the body that privilege cannot prevent. The slow, creeping ailments of those who feast too much, sit too long, and move too little. Go. Stiff joints, failing digestion, sleeplessness, weak limbs hidden beneath gilded sleeves. These are the companions of nobility, silent, ever-present, and rarely spoken of aloud. Because in your world, to suffer is not uncommon, but to show it, that is another matter. The poor suffer openly. They groan in fields, collapse on roadsides, cry out when hunger claws too deep. But you, and those like you, must suffer gracefully, elegantly, silently. You wonder what truths would emerge if the great lords of the realm ever sat together, not at a banquet table, but around a hearth, without servants or scribes. Would they speak plainly then about the sleepless nights, the aching backs, the fear that their bodies, so long indulged, are slowly turning against them? Or would they still smile, still raise their goblets, still say, "To your health, my friend," while silently calculating how much more wine they could drink before the pain returned? You exhale softly. You are tired, not just in limb, but in spirit, tired of the pretense, the pageantry, the unspoken agreement that to be noble is to pretend everything is fine. Thomas, still kneeling, clears his throat gently. "My lord, shall I fetch Master Gilbert?" You shake your head again. "No, the pain is not urgent." "Very well." He begins to rise, but you stop him with a gesture. "Thomas," you say quietly, "tell me, do the servants speak of us? Of our ailments?" He blinks, startled by the question. "Sometimes, my lord, but always in private, and always with respect." You nod, thoughtful. They must think us strange, to live in such splendor, yet suffer so much. He hesitates. They think, life always finds a way to balance itself, my lord. You meet his eyes. Wise words, from a man with no lands, no titles, no fine boots. You offer him a small smile. Just balance. That seems to be the lesson. You finally shift forward in your chair. The pain sparks briefly but subsides with stillness. With Thomas's help, you rise slowly. Your weight is uneven, but bearable. He supports you gently, leading you toward the side passage, a quieter way to your private chamber, away from the gaze of the remaining staff. The candles behind you continue to die, one by one, as you leave the great hall. And as you walk through the stone corridor, limping but upright, you carry with you a strange comfort. You are not alone in your pain. It binds you to your peers more tightly than blood or oaths ever could. And though no one says it aloud, silence has its own kind of solidarity. Dawn after the feast. Morning comes not with trumpets or bells, but with the quiet shifting of light against old stone. The sky is pale, washed with the softest hues of winter blue, and the manor is hushed in that fragile hour between sleep and stirring, when the fires are still low, and even the dogs have not yet begun to bark. You are awake before the servants knock. The poppy has worn off. The night has passed. The pain has returned, not in the full force of a flare, but in the quiet, nagging way that speaks of unfinished business, of a body that has been pushed, again, just far enough to crack. You sit on the edge of the bed, breath measured, foot lowered slowly to the cold stone floor. It is stiff, heavy, like something foreign attached to your leg, but manageable. Your hand finds the edge of the bedside table, steadying yourself. You do not call for Thomas just yet. Not this morning. For once, you wish to sit with your pain in solitude, to let it speak to you clearly, without balm, without comment, without interruption. Outside, frost rims the lower panes of the window. Beyond the gardens, smoke rises from the baker's cottage, a single line against the pale sky. The estate is waking. The village too, no doubt. Fires kindled, doors unbolted, carts loaded with grain or dung. Their pain, if it exists, is of another kind. Harsh, yes, but temporary. A cold stone under bare feet. The sore back from the yoke. A scratch, a burn, a bruise. But it will not linger. It will not settle in the joints and take up residence like a sullen guest. That is yours alone. You reach for your robe and slowly rise to your feet. The movement is practiced now, a slow lean to the left, a hand braced on the post, a careful pivot. You dress not in finery today, but in simpler cloth, undyed wool, loose at the sleeve, hemmed high enough not to catch your foot. You do not call for a squire. You dress yourself. It is not an act of defiance, exactly, nor of shame. Simply necessity, and perhaps a small effort at reclaiming some part of yourself that once lived outside of expectation. You make your way to the inner solar, where the sun strikes first. The room is warmer here. The stone retains the heat from the kitchen beneath, and the morning light lays gently across the wooden floor. A single chair waits by the window, not a throne, not a lord's seat, just an old, worn thing, softened by use. You lower yourself into it slowly, and breathe. A servant arrives a moment later, surprised to find you already seated. She carries a tray with watered wine, soft bread, and a boiled egg. You thank her quietly. She bows and disappears. You eat in silence. Each bite is plain, each sip without sweetness. Yet in that simplicity, something strange stirs. Not satisfaction, perhaps, but clarity. You are not performing now. There is no steward watching, no baron seated beside you. There is no music, no spices, no embroidered cloth to soak the wine. There is only bread and light and the soft ache of a foot that reminds you, you are still alive. Thomas arrives shortly after, waiting just inside the doorway. You gesture him in. No audience this morning, you say. He nods. Very good, my lord. I'll receive the steward here, and the bailiff, after I've eaten. Shall I tell the kitchen to delay the midday meal? Just something light. A pottage, perhaps. As you wish. He pauses before leaving, then carefully. You managed last night better than I feared. You meet his eyes. I'm beginning to understand how much can be endured when there's no other choice. He nods once and withdraws, and you are left alone again, with your cooling bread and the light that stretches slowly across the stone. A few sparrows land on the sill outside. They peck at something unseen, their movements sharp, efficient. No fanfare, no celebration. Just life as it is. You watch them and wonder, not for the first time, if there is a kind of nobility in that too. No title, no estate, just function, movement, presence, a breath, a perch, a flight. You lean back in the chair, foot elevated on a stool that someone placed there, quietly without your asking. And in that moment, you feel something rare. Equilibrium. Not ease, not comfort, but balance. And for now, that is enough. Court in the Great Hall. By midday, the Great Hall has been transformed once more. Gone are the feasting tables, the wine-stained linens, the flickering candelabras. In their place stands the long oak bench of judgment, its surface worn smooth by decades of service. The room smells now not of spices or roasted meats, but of wax, parchment, and the faint tang of damp stone. The tapestries remain, depicting saints and lions and battles long faded from memory, but the air holds a different weight. This is no celebration. This is court. And today, you preside. You enter slowly through the side passage, supported by your staff, foot-bound and padded beneath your robe. The steward stands waiting, flanked by two clerks with ink-stained fingers. The bailiff, a tall man with sharp eyes and a rigid spine, gives a brief nod of acknowledgement as you pass. Thomas has prepared the chair with extra cushions, and a small, discreet stool is tucked beneath the dais for your foot. You settle yourself carefully, exhaling only once. The effort to appear effortless never wanes. Villagers begin to file into the lower hall. They wear their best, which is to say, their cleanest wool, their least patched cloaks. Men doff their caps. Women bow their heads. Children cling to their mothers' skirts. All eyes glance upward, toward you their lord. Not with awe, but with expectation. You are not a symbol to them. You are authority made flesh. They do not care that you limped to your seat. They care whether you will grant leniency, or deliver punishment, or hear their side of the dispute with fair ears. And so you listen. A tenant complains of a neighbor's goats trampling his barley. A widow petitions for an extension on her tithe. A young man is accused of stealing turnips from the manor garden. Each case is presented, debated, and decided, some with coin, some with labor, some with a stern warning and a promise that next time, the punishment will not be so gentle. Then comes John. He walks with hesitation, cap clutched in calloused hands, eyes fixed on the floor. The bailiff speaks first. "My lord, this is John of Briarfield. This is his third absence from required work duty this winter. You study the man before you. He is thin, shoulders stooped, clothes damp at the hem. His face is weathered, not from age, but from life. You speak plainly. What say you to this charge?" John raises his head only slightly. "My lord, my wife, she's ill. Has been for weeks. A wasting sickness. She can't tend the fire or fetch water. I stayed behind to care for her." His voice is steady, but heavy with guilt, not for the crime, but for bringing it before you. You say nothing at first. You glance at the steward. He raises a brow, but does not speak. The bailiff stiffens, expecting judgment. The clerk dips his quill. You nod slowly. 3 missed days. Yet your field is still plowed. "Yes, my lord. I rose early, worked what hours I could, but I couldn't leave her alone." Silence fills the hall. Then you speak. No penalty this time. Your absence is recorded, but forgiven under circumstance. You will make up the lost time by assisting the reeve during spring preparations. John bows so low his forehead nearly touches the flagstones. "Thank you, my lord. I swear I'll see it done." You lift a hand. "And John, tell your wife that Lady Ellalinina will send broth and linens from the manor. She should not want for warmth this winter." There is a murmur in the hall, quiet approval, not loud enough to be disrespectful, but unmistakable in tone. The bailiff's mouth tightens, but he says nothing. John bows again, his hands shaking slightly. You move on. More disputes follow. More decisions rendered. Some harsh, some lenient. Always, the balance is delicate. You are judge, but also caretaker. Too soft, and you encourage laziness. Too harsh, and you sow bitterness. But you are not the same man who ruled last season. Your pain, unwanted as it is, has made you watch more closely. Feel more deeply. You notice the tired way a man stands, the hesitation in a woman's voice, the lines on a boy's face that speak of cold nights without enough wood. Gout has made your foot brittle, but it has made your gaze sharper. The session ends near the hour of sext. The villagers file out with quiet bows, some lighter than when they arrived, others grumbling beneath their breath. The clerk closes the register. The steward gathers his notes. The hall begins to empty again. But you remain seated, hands resting on your lap, eyes on the door. Thomas approaches quietly. My lord, shall I fetch your tonic? You nod once. Yes, and ask Master Gilbert to visit this evening. Thomas bows and departs. You sit alone in the fading light. And as the hush settles once more upon the ancient stones of the hall, you think not of law or reputation or judgment. You think of John, of his sick wife, of his bowed head, and of the strange, quiet grace that can exist between a lord and his people, when pain teaches compassion more powerfully than tradition ever could. A simpler robe, a clearer mind. The wind has shifted. It carries with it the scent of thawing earth, the faint sharpness of early rain, and something else, something quieter, subtler. A shift not only in the season, but in yourself. You sit once again in your solar, the soft warmth of the fire at your side, a woolen blanket draped loosely across your knees. The robe you wear is simple. No embroidery, no precious dyes, no brocade. Just undyed wool, carefully woven, warm to the skin, and light on the shoulder. It is not what your station demands. But for once, you no longer feel bound by that demand. You run your hands slowly down the robe's sleeve. The texture is rougher than velvet, less forgiving to the touch, but honest. There is no deception in it. No performance. It is what it appears to be. Much like you. Your wife, Lady Elelenina, enters quietly. She carries a small tray, a bowl of lentil pottage, a few slices of brown bread, and a single sprig of thyme resting atop the broth like a green whisper. Nothing sweet, she says with a smile. Nothing heavy. You nod. She sets the tray down, then sits beside you in a lower chair. There is no need for words, not immediately. Yours is a marriage no longer built on ceremony or negotiation, but on the quieter scaffolding of understanding. After a moment, she speaks. You've been quieter lately. I've been listening. To what? Myself. She nods. And? My appetite is not what it was. My foot, still sore. But it's more than that. I find I no longer crave the same things. Food. Applause. Appearances. She smiles gently. You're growing older. I'm growing inward. She leans back, studying you. It's not weakness, you know, to want less. I used to think it was. I used to believe austerity was for monks and paupers. And now I wonder if we've mistaken indulgence for strength. You lift a spoonful of pottage to your lips. It is warm, earthy, and soft. No fire, no sweetness, just sustenance. But it is enough. Elelenina glances toward the hearth. The kitchen's struggling with your new instructions. I expected as much. They think it reflects on them, that simpler meals mean they've failed. You consider this. Then let them rise to the challenge. You say, let them learn the craft of restraint. Fewer spices, but better herbs. Exactly. Fewer sauces, but better ingredients. She nods. You add, less, not as sacrifice, but as refinement. The thought settles between you like a blanket pulled up on a cold evening. It is not minimalism for its own sake. It is precision, intention, a trimming of the excess that once dulled the senses. You finish your meal slowly, every bite deliberate. Later that afternoon, you walk, slowly, through the manor garden. The winter has left the trees bare, the soil compacted. But the path is clear, and Thomas has prepared a bench near the southern wall where the sun strikes warmest in the late hours. You sit. Birdsong returns faintly to the branches above. A robin hops from twig to twig, unbothered by your presence. The world feels unpolished, imperfect, and yet peaceful. You reflect, then, not just on your gout, or your station, or your hunger, but on how little attention you've paid to these small moments before now. So much of your life has been consumed by the next event, the next feast, the next guest, the next show of strength. But perhaps strength is not in the showing at all. Perhaps it is in the quiet refusal to continue the performance. A footman approaches from the path with a letter in hand, sealed in green wax. You break it open. It is an invitation to a spring hunt hosted by a distant cousin of the king. Days of riding, feasting, and revelry. You fold the letter, set it beside you. You do not yet know whether you will go. But you know if you do, you will wear this robe, and eat only what you need, and drink only what you enjoy, and no more. Not because you are lesser than you once were, but because now you know what is truly yours and what was merely expected. A walk through the garden. The garden is waking. The trees remain bare, their limbs like outstretched fingers silhouetted against a sky the color of worn parchment, but the ground below them stirs with life. Shoots of green push cautiously through the thawing soil. The frost still bites the air, but something new lingers beneath it, a promise, faint but firm. You walk slowly, your cane steady in one hand, the weight of your body carefully measured with each step. The path beneath your boots is familiar, pressed earth, scattered pebbles, the occasional loose stone that you now recognize by memory more than sight. At your side walks Lady Elelenina, her cloak drawn tight around her shoulders, her pace matched to yours without needing to speak. She has walked this path too many times to need direction. And perhaps more than anyone else, she knows what this morning means to you. Not merely a stroll, not exercise, but an affirmation. Your foot still aches, though the pain is duller now, more memory than message. The linen shoe Thomas helped design with the cobbler cushions the joint well. You feel almost stable again, though you dare not speak the thought aloud. Such moments are best held quietly, like candles cupped in the wind. Birds sing from the hedgerow. A blackbird calls once, then again. Life, it seems, continues without regard for the worries of lords. You pause beneath an arch of weathered stone, once the entrance to an herb garden maintained by the manor's old apothecary. The rosemary is gone for winter, but sage and thyme cling to life, brown at the edges but stubbornly rooted. Elelenina kneels slightly and plucks a leaf, rubbing it between her fingers. Still fragrant, she says. You nod. The roots are stronger than they appear. She looks up at you with a faint smile. So I've noticed. You do not reply. The compliment sits gently between you. Not inflated, not theatrical, just true. You resume your walk, heading now toward the orchard slope where apple trees stand in orderly lines, their branches reaching like arms yearning for spring. You stop before the largest one, gnarled with age, split once by lightning, its bark rough and furrowed like the hand of a laborer. This tree was planted the year my father died, you say. Elelenina nods, her hands folded in front of her. I remember. She's borne fruit every year since. Even last year, when the summer was thin. She'll bear again. You place your hand on the bark. It is cold, but firm. A few paces away stands the bench Thomas had arranged days ago. You move to it and sit, the breath easing from your chest as you settle. The view from here is wide, over the garden wall, past the tenant fields, toward the wooded hills beyond. The land is gray and tired, but awake. You remember when you used to ride to those hills, full gallop, bows slung across your back, chasing boar or stag. Now the thought of the saddle brings not joy, but calculation. How long could you sit? How would the foot behave? What if the pain returned mid-hunt? But you are not bitter. There is something else growing where the bitterness once tried to root. Understanding. You have begun to see the world in gradients, not only of pain and comfort, but of expectation and choice. You once moved because you had to, because others watched, because tradition dictated, because reputation required. But now you move because you wish to. And in that difference lies a freedom you never imagined. Elelenina sits beside you. The Baron sent word, she says after a moment. He says the feast still lingers in his memory. He asks how you manage such civility with such restraint. You laugh, a soft breath, more air than sound. I endure, you say, like the herbs, like the tree. He also said you seemed quieter than he remembered. I am. She doesn't ask for an explanation. Instead, she places her hand lightly atop yours. You watch the clouds roll slowly across the sky. Not long ago, you would have already been at council. You would have risen with the sun, dressed in embroidered layers, given orders, reviewed taxes, prepared for guests. All important, yes, but none urgent. Now you allow the garden its moment. You watch the way the wind moves through brittle grass. You listen to the crows arguing over a bit of bread left behind by the kitchen boy. You feel the cool stone of the bench beneath you, and you begin to wonder, was this always here? Or did I simply never notice? The ache in your foot stirs again, but gently, like a bell rung far away. You shift slightly, adjusting your robe, letting the air move through you. The garden does not ask you to perform. It does not care who you are or what title you carry. It simply invites you to be still. And in that stillness, for the first time in many years, you accept the invitation. Fire in Oakley Village. The letter arrives in the late evening, carried by a boy too young for such grim errands. His cloak is damp with mist, his boots caked in mud, his hands trembling slightly as he offers the folded parchment to Thomas, who accepts it with a quiet nod. You are seated near the hearth when it reaches you, wrapped in your plain wool robe, a book of estate records open in your lap. You recognize the seal immediately, not noble but official. The crest of Oakley, your most distant holding. The letter is short, direct, written in a hurried hand. My lord, a fire last night in Oakley. 3 cottages lost. No deaths, but all possessions gone. The people are safe, for now. Winter is harsh, and there is no shelter. We await your instruction. You read the note twice, then a third time. By the second line, your chest has already tightened. Not with panic, but with responsibility. You hand the parchment to Elenina, who reads it in silence. When she finishes, she lowers it slowly to her lap. We must act quickly, she says. You nod. Have the steward prepare blankets, food stores, anything portable, you reply. And tell the bailiff to meet me in the stables at first light. She studies your face. You mean to go yourself? Yes. The roads are rough this time of year. I know. And your foot? You look down at it, wrapped still in its soft leather, cradled like something precious. The pain is tolerable. The strength not yet returned. But it no longer rules you. I'll manage, you say. She says nothing more, only places her hand over yours. And in that gesture, you feel not permission, but partnership. The next morning is gray with low clouds and the smell of snow in the air. 2 servants help you mount your horse, a broad-chested, even-tempered animal bred for comfort over speed. Your foot is carefully swaddled, the stirrup padded. Every movement is deliberate, every discomfort ignored. The ride to Oakley is 5 miles of winter earth, soft in places, slick in others, the cart tracks worn deep by previous journeys. 2 guards ride with you, and Thomas trails behind on a pack mule bearing wool, grain, and salted meat. It is not a noble procession. It is aid. And your presence is no longer for display. It is needed. The village of Oakley comes into view in the early afternoon. A cluster of rooftops nestled among low hills, smoke curling from stone chimneys, fields lying bare beneath a thin veil of frost. And at its edge, blackened timber. 3 cottages, or what remains of them. The fire had spread quickly through thatch and timber. The walls are collapsed inward, charred beams crisscrossing the ruins like broken ribs. Ash dusts the ground. A child's wooden spoon lies half buried in the gray. A clay cup, cracked down the middle, sits where a hearth once stood. The people stand in silence as you dismount. They had not expected you. The reeve, a stout man named Alric, rushes forward, wiping soot from his sleeves as he bows deeply. Part of the roads. are passable, you interrupt gently. Show me. He leads you past the remains, naming the families who lived there. A mother and 2 children, an elderly couple, a young husband and wife, newly married. All survived, thanks to quick hands and wet blankets. But they lost everything else. The families now huddle in the church and in a neighbor's barn, wrapped in borrowed cloaks, sleeping close together on hay. The oldest child coughs quietly in the corner. You step inside the barn, the smell of animals and cold straw thick in the air. A young woman stands to greet you, eyes wide with disbelief. My lord, you came yourself. You nod. You've lost much. I wanted to see. She hesitates, then says softly, we feared we'd have to wait until spring. No, you say. No one on my land should spend winter without a roof. You give instructions to the relive. Temporary shelters to be built. Stone and timber sent from the manor. Grain shared from reserve stores. The men of the village will help, and you will pay their families directly for the time lost in fieldwork. It is a debt of honor, not charity. The villagers bow. Some weep quietly. Some merely nod. Their trust is not given lightly. But today, you have earned a little more of it. As you ride back, the wind picks up. The first flakes of snow begin to fall, soft, hesitant, like apologies from the sky. You pull your cloak tighter and urge the horse onward, each jolt sending a throb through your leg. But you say nothing. You are not a martyr. You are simply a lord. And this, too, is what it means to hold that title. To carry not just the wealth, but the weight. You arrive home at dusk, cold to the bone. Lady Elenina meets you in the entry hall, her hands warm as she removes your gloves. You tell her everything, what you saw, what you promised. She does not speak right away. Instead, she pulls a chair close to the fire and gestures for you to sit. You'll need rest tonight. You lower yourself carefully. The fire crackles. Your foot burns faintly, a protest and a badge all at once. Do you regret going? She asks. You look into the flames. No, you say. If anything, I regret not going sooner. Snow and ashes. The next morning dawns colder. Not the gentle kind of winter chill that hangs like lace in the air, but the deeper, bone-settling cold that settles into stone and sinew alike. Even before you open your eyes, you can feel it pressing through the windows, through the ancient mortar of the manor walls, through the soles of your feet. Your body aches, not just the foot, but the shoulder, the thigh, even the spine. The ride to Oakley, noble in intention, was taxing in practice. Still, you do not regret it. The pain is a fair toll, the kind one expects when traveling roads soaked in snowmelt and obligation. You rise slowly, your hand gripping the bedpost as you do each morning now. Thomas is already at the door with your walking staff and your thickest robe, the one lined with sheepskin. No embroidery, no gold thread, just warmth. Any word from Oakley? You ask as he helps you with your boots. Yes, my lord. The relive sent a rider before sunrise. The villagers have begun clearing the rubble. The blacksmith offers timber. The stone mason rides out this morning. You nod. That is well. That is right. You make your way carefully to the solar, where Lady Elenina is already seated beside the fire, reading a page of correspondence. She looks up and smiles, not the distant smile of courtly obligation, but the quiet curve of shared resolve. More news? From the mason, she replies. He requests approval to begin foundation work before the next frost. Granted. You lower yourself into the opposite chair. The cushion has been adjusted slightly, so your foot rests higher, the ache eased just enough to keep thought from fracturing. The fire burns low, but steadily. Beyond the windows, snow falls in slow spirals. Not the wild, blinding storm that shutters villages, but the calm kind, the kind that silences everything it touches. You watch it for a long moment. Do you remember, you ask softly, when fire frightened us? She raises an eyebrow. You mean when we were young? Or when we still feared we'd lose the manor to one? Both. She nods. I remember the drought year, when even the wind felt flammable. You smile faintly. And now Oakley burns in winter. There's a cruel symmetry in that. You shift your leg slightly, testing the soreness. It answers, but with less resistance than yesterday. And then you say something you have not said in years. I want to ride out again tomorrow. Elenina turns to face you fully. Your foot. I'll manage. I want to see them build. She tilts her head, studying you. You've changed, you know. I know. Before you would have sent coin, stone, timber, but not yourself. I thought that was enough. And now, you meet her eyes. Now I see that leadership is not just what one commands. It's what one shows. She smiles again, this time not as wife, but as equal. As someone who understands the weight of change. Then I'll have the cook prepare travel food. And extra furs. We ride with sunrise. Later that day, the steward enters with a parchment bearing requests from other villages. A repair to a millstone. A dispute over water rights. A tenant family seeking permission to harvest dead wood for fuel. You read them slowly, carefully, and for each, you do not simply scribble an answer. You pause. You consider. You write personally, not because you must, but because something within you now requires it. The cold outside sharpens as night falls. The manor groans slightly in its joints, old timber creaking like ribs in sleep. The fire is stoked again, and supper is brought on a plain wooden tray, barley, herbs, and boiled root vegetables. No meat tonight. Your own request. You eat slowly. You have come to understand the value of modest meals, not only for the body, but for the mind. You taste more. You feel more. You remember more. And tonight, you remember the sound of boots in the ash, of villagers clutching what little they saved. You remember the smell of burned wool, the sight of a child holding a doll charred at the edges but still cradled like treasure. And you remember your own oath, that no one under your care would face winter without a roof. You finish your meal. You walk to the window. Snow continues to fall in gentle silence. But somewhere, 5 miles away, stone is being lifted, timber aligned, hands joined. And that is enough to keep the fire in your chest burning through the frost. Shelter before spring. The second journey to Oakley is easier. Not because the roads are smoother. Indeed, they are worse. The night snowfall has hardened into brittle crusts, and the hooves of your horse crunch through the surface with each step. But your body, though still tender, has adjusted. The foot remains tightly wrapped in linen and wool, and the stirrup is padded anew. Each jolt sends a whisper of protest upward, but it does not command your attention the way it once did. You ride in silence. At your side, Lady Elenina matches your pace with quiet dignity. Behind you, 2 guards and a cart laden with beams, nails, and salted fish trail faithfully. A second cart, this one smaller, carries 2 mason apprentices and a cooper from the manor. The sound of wheels over frozen ground is steady, wood over winter, motion over memory. When Oakley finally emerges into view, you are struck not by ruin, but by rhythm. The village is alive. Gone are the ashen heaps and bowed heads. In their place, frames rising from the frost-bitten soil, the rhythmic clang of hammers, the creak of pulley ropes, the grunts of effort. Villagers move between timber and stone like ants in careful procession. Children carry straw bundles. Old men saw through beams. Women stitch roof thatch from fresh-cut reeds. And at the center of it all, a clearing, where your cart is immediately welcomed. You dismount carefully. The reeve, Alric, approaches at once. "My lord," he says, bowing low, "you return as you promised. Did you think I wouldn't?" He smiles. "No, my lord, but we've known others who said more and did less." You clasp his hand firmly. "Then let this be a new kind of knowing." He leads you through the rebuilding. The first cottage's walls are already half raised. The mason has marked where the hearth will go, centered now, not pressed to one side. Stronger foundation, better insulation. You inspect the work closely, ask questions, offer observations. Not as a distant patron, but as a participant. When one beam wobbles under testing, you call for a brace. When a boy offers you a mug of warm broth, you accept without pretense. The people watch you, not with suspicion, but with attention. The way one watches something unfamiliar, hoping it remains. And you do. You remain the entire afternoon. You help place stones in a low wall. You hold a level for the carpenter. You kneel once, carefully, beside a young man aligning roof pitch, and suggest a more weatherproof slant. When you finally sit, by the fire built in the churchyard center, it is not as a guest of honor. It is as one who has worked. Lady Elalanina sits beside you. A young girl wraps a scarf around your shoulders. You don't protest. The villagers eat together that night, stew thickened with lentils, wild onion, and dried meat. Simple, nourishing. A meal of survival, not ceremony. And yet there is laughter. Not loud, nor drunken, but real. You sip from your wooden bowl slowly and gaze into the fire. Someone has begun to play a reed whistle. Two of the children dance in slow circles, their hands linked. Even the mason's apprentices chuckle as they chew. This is not a feast, but it is something more honest. And you find you prefer it. As darkness falls, you rise stiffly from your bench. Alric approaches once more. "We've salvaged enough thatch for the third roof," he says. "By week's end, they'll all have shelter." "Before the thaw?" "Before the thaw." You nod, and something in your chest loosens. "Keep the carts," you say, "and the tools." "My lord, I'll send word if I need them returned. Until then, they are yours." The reeve bows deeply. "This we will not forget." As you mount your horse, your foot groans with fatigue, but does not collapse. And as you ride slowly out of the village, flanked by torchlight and drifting snow, you feel no grandeur, no pride, only rightness. It is not a feeling you have known often, but now it lingers like warm breath in winter. You glance back once, just before the hill crests. Oakley glows behind you, not with gold or torches or oil lamps, but with human effort, with the stubborn, beautiful will to survive. And with that, you ride into the quiet dark. The steward's ledger and the new plan. 3 days have passed since your return from Oakley. Snow still clings to the corners of the manor courtyard, melting slowly beneath the pale winter sun, forming rivulets that wind between the cobblestones like silver veins. Birds have returned to the rafters above the chapel, their songs sparse but persistent. The hearth in your solar burns day and night, the logs split and seasoned, tended carefully by Thomas, who seems to anticipate the fire's mood like one might a fussy child. Your foot still throbs in the evenings, but it is no longer the dominant voice in your body's chorus. Merely a low drumbeat, background to the decisions now forming in your mind. You sit at your desk today, not for records or ritual, but for reform. Before you lies the steward's ledger. Its calfskin binding is familiar. The spine creaks slightly as you open it, revealing a year's worth of parchment filled with tight script. Names, amounts, inventories, tributes, dues, fines, weather notations, yield reports. It is the heart of your estate, etched in ink. Lady Elalanina stands at the window nearby, reading correspondence from a cloth merchant in Dunwich, but she watches you from the corner of her eye. She knows you too well not to sense the weight of what you're preparing to say. You run a finger down the latest entry. Winter allotment to tenants, 4 sacks of barley. Dried beans, reduced by half, as per surplus decline. You close the book. The system is efficient, you say aloud. Is that not what you wanted? She asks, setting the letter aside. It is. But efficiency is not the same as wisdom. She tilts her head, encouraging you to continue. The ledger favors numbers, you explain. But people don't live in numbers. They live in need, in season, in crisis. You pause, then add quietly, Oakley taught me that. She walks to your side, resting a hand on the edge of the desk. What are you thinking? That it is time for a new plan. You open a blank sheet and begin to write, slowly and deliberately. Not a letter, not a decree, but a proposal, a redesign of the manor's provisioning structure. Not punishment for those who fall behind, but support for those in danger of falling. Not grain hoarded for prestige, but grain shared strategically, so no family burns furniture for fire or eats spoiled oats by moonlight. You draw off columns. Emergency allotments. Work for shelter. Mason retainer pool. Field rotation relief. You pause often, not because of pain, but because the ideas deserve thoughtfulness, not haste. Later, you present the draft to the steward in the hall. He is surprised, then skeptical. His fingers trace the edges of the new chart, his brow furrowing at the adjustments in tribute percentages and the suggested reevaluation of winter labor rotation. With respect, my lord, he says carefully, this favors forgiveness. No, you reply calmly, it favors foresight. And if the granaries run short? They won't. But even if they do, better that than a burned cottage and a frozen widow. He's quiet for a moment, then nods once. As you wish. You know change is slow. You know there will be resistance, from the other lords, from the merchants, perhaps even from your own advisors. But the fire in Oakley did more than consume 3 cottages. It illuminated something within you. You've ruled your estate like a sword, precise, sharp, unwavering. But now, you will rule it also like a hand, open, steady, willing to lift what cannot rise on its own. That evening, you sit once again by the fire, the new plan tucked into the folds of your journal. Thomas pours your tea with care, and Lady Elalina joins you without a word, her eyes glancing to the parchment beside you. You're changing the shape of the manor, she says. Not the shape, you reply. Only the weight. You sip. The flavor is light, mint, perhaps, or thyme. Nothing extravagant, but it warms you. And as the snow begins to fall again, just beyond the glass, you understand that power is not just what is held. It is also what is lifted. Spices reimagined. The kitchen had once been your most boastful space. It was there, beneath the vaulted brick ceiling and rows of hanging copper pans, that your wealth was most visibly transformed. Into sauces thick with cream, into meats soaked in honeyed wine, into pastries so laden with clove and nutmeg they could have passed for coins. The manor's cooks were proud. And they had every reason to be. They had won you praise, envy, and political favor with nothing more than butter, sugar, and fire. But now you've asked them to unlearn. At first, the change was met with silence. Then confusion. Then resistance. Boiled cabbage, my lord? The head cook had said, blinking as though you'd asked him to serve snow. No more imported cinnamon, you had said, no saffron unless it is needed for trade. I want our tables to reflect our soil, our season, our people. It was not an insult, but it was taken as one. And so, you found yourself here, again, among the ovens and the stew pots, watching your kitchen staff like a baron watches his battalion. They are not angry now, just uncertain, suspicious of your new restraint, as if it were a passing illness. Today, however, You offered them a challenge. Create a feast, you said, with no more than what we grow, raise, or forage within a day's ride of the manor. You left them to it. You didn't interfere. You merely waited. The results come 4 days later, not as fanfare, not as a grand unveiling, but as a quiet procession of dishes served at a midday meal for you, Lady Ellalinina, and 3 local bailiffs returning from a land dispute negotiation. The table is modest. No silver goblets. No gilded crusts. Just bowls of glazed parsnip soup, roasted turnips with rosemary, oat flatbread brushed with goose fat, and a dessert made from stewed crab apples and wild honey. And it is perfect. Not perfect in decadence, but in clarity. Every flavor is itself. Nothing hidden. Nothing disguised. Ellalinina chews slowly, eyes half closed. This is, she begins. Honest, you finish. One of the bailiffs, a broad-shouldered man more used to cold beer and barley mash, sets down his spoon and exhales. I never knew a parsnip could taste like that. You smile. The head cook watches from the side of the room, arms crossed, face unreadable. But you see the glint in his eye. He has not been defeated. He has been reinvigorated. Later that day, you summon him privately. He arrives still wearing his apron, dusted in flour, the sleeves of his tunic rolled to the elbow. You've proven your worth twice over, you say. And now I ask more. His eyebrow lifts. I want you to train your apprentices, not in excess, but in intention. Show them that luxury does not lie in quantity, but in care. He is quiet. Then he nods. It will take time. So does anything worth learning. He bows slightly and leaves. And you feel, for the first time in years, that your kitchen is no longer a theater. It is a craft. That evening, you and Lady Ellalinina take supper alone. A small dish of split peas with leek. Baked pear. No wine tonight, just water from the manor's own well. She leans back and sighs softly. I thought I'd miss the cinnamon, she says. And? I don't. You sip slowly. I think we've confused spice for meaning. She glances at you. You're not speaking only of food. You don't reply. You don't need to. Outside, the wind carries the last of winter's breath across the orchard. But inside, in your hall, a new warmth begins to settle, not in spice, not in show, but in simplicity earned, not bought. And you finally realize, to taste clearly is to live clearly. And now you do both. A Lord's reflection at the chapel. The chapel is not grand. Its walls are plain stone, mortared long ago by village masons. The floor is packed earth, overlaid with straw mats in winter and rushes in summer. A narrow altar of weathered oak rests beneath a stained glass window so small that it casts more shadow than light. And yet, this place, more than the manor, more than the hall, feels eternal. You enter just after prime, when the air is still chilled and the first light of morning has not yet climbed past the treetops. The chapel is empty, save for a single candle left burning in the corner and a draft that slips beneath the door like an unseen guest. You do not come here for prayer in the traditional sense. You come to listen, to silence, to breath, to the sound of your own thoughts, unmuffled by servants or steward reports or the shifting expectations of court life. You lower yourself onto the narrow bench and exhale slowly. Your foot, wrapped and warmed, rests lightly on the cushion Thomas placed here last week without being asked. You never commented on it, but you remember. In your hand is not a book of psalms, but a small bound volume, your personal ledger of thoughts. You flip it open. Among its pages, half-finished sentences, dates of snowfall, small sketches of garden walls, and the occasional line of poetry you copied from an old Roman translation. You write slowly. What is peace, if not the absence of needing to prove anything? You pause, then write again. Power misunderstood becomes performance. Power understood becomes presence. You sit back, letting those thoughts settle. A raven calls in the trees beyond the stained glass. You look up, and through the colored pane, a sliver of golden light paints the altar in dim blue and red. You remember your father sitting here, broad-backed, unsmiling, always arriving late and leaving early. For him, this chapel was obligation, a ledger to balance with heaven. But for you, it has become something else. A refuge not from sin, but from noise. Lady Elenina finds you there near the hour of terce. She doesn't speak, merely enters and takes a seat beside you on the same bench, her hands folded in her lap. You do not look at each other. You do not need to. After a long moment, she whispers, "They're finishing the roof in Oakley today." You nod. And the spring sowing is ahead of schedule. Again you nod. And then, after a silence, "You've changed." "So you've said." "This time, I mean in the way you look at silence." You smile gently. "It speaks more than I ever gave it credit for." She looks at the volume in your hand. "Are you writing a gospel?" "No," you reply. "Just trying to understand what comes after strength." She places her hand over yours. "You're beginning to lead with stillness," she says. "That is harder than leading with command." You don't answer, not out of pride, but because you know she is right. That afternoon, you walk the manor's upper halls, pausing beside the long arched windows that overlook the valley. The land below is thawing, rivulets run between furrows, and the sheep no longer huddle near the stone wall. You watch a plowman cross a distant field with his oxen, moving with the slow grace of someone who does not rush what takes time. You feel a kinship in that now. In slowness. In intentionality. Before supper, you return briefly to the chapel. You light a new candle and leave it burning before the altar. Not in supplication. Not in fear. But as a mark of presence. A reminder that your power does not only reside in the ledger, or the hall, or the armed men who ride under your banner. It resides in this space, too. In the quiet. In the breath. In the awareness that you are no longer striving to prove you are a lord. Because now, finally, you are becoming one. Gout as a teacher. You once cursed your foot. In the long nights, when the pain crept up your leg like fire licking the edge of parchment, when even the weight of a linen sheet felt like a hammer, when you clenched your jaw to keep from waking the house. Yes, then you cursed it. You called it betrayal, punishment, a weakness unbefitting your station. But not now. Not anymore. You sit on the covered walkway that faces the manor's inner courtyard. The day is cool, but bright, and sunlight cuts sharp angles across the stone columns. A servant sweeps fallen leaves from the flagstones. Somewhere, a pair of hounds bark at a raven perched insolently on the stable roof. You shift in your chair, testing your foot. The pain is there, but quieter. Not absent, not cured, just transformed. It no longer rules you. It instructs you. You've come to see that the body speaks in ways the mind often ignores. That pain, though cruel, has a language. And if listened to, not fought, not feared, but truly heard, it becomes more than suffering. It becomes a tutor. Your gout taught you stillness. It taught you presence. It stripped away the illusions of strength and left behind something you did not expect. Awareness. You notice now the smallest things. How the morning sun touches the rim of your cup before warming the liquid inside. How your steward hesitates just slightly before disagreeing, and how a small nod from you gives him permission to speak freely. How peasants bow not too deeply when you pass, but just enough to say, "We trust you will not break us." These are lessons your youth would have trampled. Your prime would have dismissed. But your pain slowed you long enough to let them in. You speak with Master Gilbert more often now, not only as patient and physician, but as men who know the limits of control. He tells you of other lords. some younger than you, some older, all fighting their own battles beneath their robes. Pain, he says, is the only messenger who never lies. You nod. You ask questions now, about herbs, about sleep, about how long it takes for the blood to cool between seasons. He shares his knowledge freely. And in doing so, you realize how much of your life has been spent commanding, not inquiring. And how much more power there is in curiosity than in decree. Later that day, you visit the stables. You do not ride. You simply stand among the animals, running your hand down the coarse mane of a mare you once favored for hunting. She stamps gently, not in impatience, but recognition. The stable boy, a lad named Tomas, watches you quietly from the hayloft. You used to ride her fast, he says, voice full of memory not his own. You smile. I used to think speed was everything. And now? You look out over the paddock, where snow has melted into muddy hoofprints. Now I think arrival matters more than pace. That night, you dine in the smaller hall. The fire is warm, the food simple, herbed lentils, a wedge of hard cheese, apples from last season's cellar. You eat slowly, chewing fully, no longer gulping between bites like a man in a rush to return to his duties. Elenina reads beside you. Occasionally, she looks up and meets your gaze. No words pass between you, but you feel the fullness of her presence. It is a presence sharpened by hardship, tempered by years, and now made gentler by your change. As the last bite passes your lips, you exhale. The pain in your foot pulses once, an old rhythm, but you welcome it. It reminds you that your body has limits, and that limits are not the enemy of leadership. They are its foundation, because a man who listens to his own ache is more likely to listen to the ache of others. And in that listening, something noble begins to bloom. The night sky above the manor. The manor is quiet. Not the silence of absence, but the kind that settles gently over things when they are in balance. You walk the upper corridor slowly, one hand trailing along the cool stone wall. Your foot is wrapped still as always, but tonight it behaves. No stab, no pull. Just a slow awareness, like the echo of a bell rung long ago. Below, the hearths are dimmed. The kitchen is asleep. The great hall is swept clean, its benches stacked neatly along the walls. A single candle flickers beside the ledger in your study, left there by Thomas, who now sleeps beside the barracks chimney, as he has every winter since his father passed. You pass a window, and pause. Outside, the world lies wrapped in darkness. But above, the sky is clear. Not a single cloud. The stars shimmer as if freshly struck from a smith's anvil. Orion hangs above the orchard. The twin stars of Gemini watch from just above the treetops. And there, low on the horizon, the moon, thinner than a scythe. You open the window. Cold air flows in at once, brushing your cheeks, stirring the folds of your robe. But you welcome it. This is the kind of cold that wakens, not wounds. You lean against the stone and breathe. It has been months since the first flare of pain sent you retreating from the great hall. Since the physician's tinctures dulled your senses and robbed your sleep. Since you wondered whether you had become too soft, too still, too broken to rule well. And yet here you are, still lord of this place, but a different kind of lord. Not the kind who governs through inherited weight and rigid tradition, but the kind who walks the fields, who tastes with intention, who listens, first to his own aching bones and then to the needs of others. You hear a sound behind you, soft footfalls. Lady Elenina appears beside you, wrapped in a shawl. She says nothing at first, only rests her arms on the window frame, gazing at the stars with you. "They're bright tonight," she murmurs. "Brighter than I remember." "No, you're just looking longer." You chuckle softly. "I suppose I am." She leans gently against your shoulder. You've become a slower man, she says. I've become a better one. She doesn't argue. Instead, she says, tomorrow, the steward wishes to review the summer plans. The new system has spread. The tenants speak of you differently now. How? They use fewer titles. You turn to her, brow lifted. And this is a good thing? She smiles. It means they no longer fear you. They trust you. That's rarer. You nod slowly and return your gaze to the sky. A shooting star traces a faint line between constellations, gone almost before you notice. Do you regret any of it? She asks. The pain. She nods. No, you say. It hurt. Deeply. But it made me stop. And in that stillness, I saw everything again. She lifts your hand and holds it between hers. You've changed this house, she says. You look through the window, at the orchard, where new buds have begun to form, at the village in the distance, where warm smoke rises gently from repaired roofs, at the fields, furrowed and waiting, and then upward, at the sky, vast and indifferent. No, you reply. They changed me. Later, you return to bed, not as a man exhausted by pain or ruled by title, but as a man who knows the weight of stillness. You lower yourself slowly, your legs supported by the soft wrap Elalanina laid out in silence. And as the candle burns low, and the frost thickens on the outer sill, and the stars will overhead in their quiet eternity, you sleep, not in escape, but in acceptance. The pain, the place, a self. The disease of kings marked your foot, but it shaped your heart. And in the soft hush of a sleeping manor, beneath the stars that watch over peasant and noble alike, you're thus at peace.